Welcome to Work in Progress. I'm your host, Dan Araujo. Work in Progress is a show where we talk to local artists, writers that you might not have heard of before. Today's guest is Rebecca Inch Partridge, who is a local author, and we're going to talk to her a little bit about her work. How you doing, Rebecca?
I'm doing great, and I am glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that you're here. So, thank you for coming on, and I guess first thing I want to know is, I love trilogies. I love all different types of, continuation stories and stuff like that. But what inspired you to write in the first place? Like, what would you say?
So, my mom was a writer, and I could never not write. In third grade, I wrote Saver Rebecca Meets Captain Kirk. Amazingly enough, it never got published. But then when Empire Strikes Back came out, I was so inspired. That's when I created my Paraxous cluster. And that Paraxous Star Cluster saga stayed with me. And I wrote those 3 books over the course of high school. But then, you get told you can't make a living as a writer, and I set my writing aside and went about my life. But I always regretted giving it up. So I kept writing and kept going to critique groups, but never thought of it as a profession. But I couldn't not write because there's something that swells up in you as an artist of any medium that has to come out. And I was living with these characters and this story in my head, and it just felt like it was going to explode. So sometimes my husband would say, please, just go write. I'll watch the kid for a while. Just go write. And so it's always just been something dear to my heart.
That's good. Well, so was it always, going back to when it first started germinating, was it always like a trilogy, or was it like maybe a beginning story and then later on the trilogy came?
So at first it was 2 books, and the first book was crap. I'm allowed to say that, right?
Yeah.
But the second book was just this world I wanted to live in, and Twyla was who I wanted to be, and I knew I had something. And the first book literally was just me clearing my throat and telling her backstory so that I understood that universe, all 16 races, how she got where she was at, and why she did what she did in this what was second book. And when I went to get it published, 2 things happened. One, they said, this is pretty good. And I came this close to getting it published. A major agent, Donald Moss, asked to see the whole manuscript, sent me a 2-page thing for revisions, which is really rare.
Yeah.
And then said, okay, so this starts in the middle. Where's book 1? And I didn't have a decent book 1 because it was just an outline in story form and way too dense. And so there you go. The whole thing just fell apart. I had to stick to my day job and wait for my next chance years later.
Yeah. Well, so for people watching, like, go ahead and tell us what your trilogy is. Like, what's the name of it and all that. What's it about, just briefly.
So the first book, Escaping the Dashia, is what was originally the first half of the first book. And it is where she is kidnapped from Earth by her biological mother because they have telepathic abilities, and her mother basically rules their version of the mob. And she wants Twyla to take her place in the family business. And Twyla doesn't want to become a psychic vampire. And that's where the term Dashia comes from. That's the word for it. And when Twyla refuses, bad things happen. And so she's got to escape not only her mother, who is a Dashia, she has to outwit her and keep herself from being forced to become a Dashia. So I always write, no matter even my nonfiction, my mysteries, everything I write is about strong female protagonists doing the right thing, even when it's really difficult, and even when there's some consequences, and sometimes it's their own life. So she does the right thing, even though it causes her a lot of harm.
And there's a third book on the way.
There's a third book on the way.
Yeah.
The second book, Hunting the Dashia, just came out, and it is where she has had enough. Her mother has killed enough of the people that she cares about. She has done these things that Twyla cannot forgive, and instead of living on the run, she decides she wants to meet up with somebody who works as a Dashia hunter, which is exactly what it sounds like. Somebody that hunts down Dashias and turn the table and go on the offensive. And all that originally was all in one book.
Okay.
Yeah. And for those watching who are writers, you can't do an 800-page book that's just basically super dense outline and expect anybody else to want to read it. You got to, especially in speculative fiction, make sure that they understand the world they're in, that they feel like they're transported there, that they understand the difference between the races so it makes sense how they behave. And you take the time but keep the action going so you're not doing info dumps and large chunks of description. And when you cut a book in half, essentially, personally, I hate half a book. I don't care if it's 350 pages. If you know originally that this was one piece of work and they slash it, even when you look at Lord of the Rings that leaves in just that total cliffhanger, you could get away with that 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Readers today, they get really frustrated.
Yes.
And when you're unknown
Yes.
and you're going to agents and editors, the phrase you have to be able to say, this stands alone, but it has series potential. And so I had to look at the middle of the book and really search out what made sense for a super tense scene to get escalated, crank up the stakes, and make that the new climax and a new denouement epilogue. And then I had to rewrite the whole second half of the thing to turn into its own book. And that meant a new opening scene that eased the reader in, made them feel comfortable again. And as the story went along, as you know, Bobs, that's when you go back and you have one character say stuff that character would know, just for the sake of the reader. And the reader knows that, and they're so tired of it. So you have to work in that information, understanding that they might pick up book 2, have never read book 1.
Right.
And while you'd love them to go, oh, I better go buy book 1, they might not. If you're not good enough of a writer to make it so they can read book 2 and not feel completely lost, why should they bother with you?
Right.
So the other thing that you've got to do is remember, even if they have read your book, how long ago was it? And what details are they going to remember? So you make it so that they can go through it and flow and get ready, while all the time remembering you don't just have the arc and character arc of book 1 now, and a plot arc and a character arc of book 2 now to worry about. Now, like a rainbow, they've all got to smoothly connect to the ending of book 3. All those threads, so that you've got a satisfying, when they get to that last page of the trilogy, they have to feel like that was worth my blood, sweat, tears that I just spent virtually.
They have to feel satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and it was all worth it, which means everything has to be building to it and nothing wasted.
I was just having a conversation with a friend about something similar to this. We were talking about how, especially with like more fantasy-driven work, how it can be so dense mythologically that you go into it and like you hear these terms or these different, and you don't know what they are. You have to stop now reading and go back and look at them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, that can be fun and interesting at some points, doing a little like on the side research for a work, but it takes you out of the story. So how do you, as a fantasy author, like how do you navigate that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so the funny thing is they did term my novel science fantasy as marketing because there's telepathy. So I cross over. If you think of Star Wars, it was a farm boy, a wizard, and a princess in space.
Mm-hmm.
And so all those things of fantasy apply to science fantasy. You have all those terms, all that mythology, and you also have the gobbledygook of science fiction with all those spaceships and terminology and geekdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my original drafts, I had tried to teach the reader the other language, Ruslo. And I had to ant out. If Tolkien could take out the majority of how he tried to teach people high elf and low elf and just set that aside and professors can teach it, I pulled that all out. But what I kept was the fact that a whole star cluster did not speak the same language. It's not Star Trek. And universal translators only work to a certain point. And that one language is guttural, and it has a certain syntax and a pattern to it. Like ASL, the grammar is different. And then the other is Ruslo. And it's flowing, and it's beautiful. It's more like French. But the only rule to the pattern of the words is that whichever sounds most beautiful, because each word tells where it goes in the order of chronology. And so if you humans have a hard time wrapping their tongue around and saying the Ruslo well, and it offends the ears of the Katians, who that's their native language. So I kept that kind of stuff.
Right.
And you axe 75% of those terms, names, and whatnot you want to use. And it's painful. And you've got to remember, just because you've introduced a term once doesn't mean 75 pages down the road they're going to remember it. A lot of times you've got to make sure the context itself explains it. So that's where you just make sure it's consistently used in a way, and once you've introduced a term, you use it again within a couple paragraphs and in a couple pages, and then the context always makes sense. So
and then reintroduce it in the next book.
Yes, reintroduce it in the next book. I have 16 races. So that's my priority, is them to understand who the races are, not the techno babble. So
You're a pretty big world.
It's a star cluster.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so by day, I might be a mild-mannered freelance editor making her bread and butter, but by night, I am ruler of the Paraxous Star Cluster, and it is so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see, that intrigues me? Like how people live in. I don't want this to sound like it's downplaying anything, but creating such a vast imaginary world.
World building.
Yeah, but while navigating this very real, cold, hard reality that we live in sometimes.
Well, I'll take it in two pieces.
Go
The
ahead.
world building, I do back-ass backward. I'm allowed to say ass. Okay, I didn't know I was so bad about this stuff. So typically, somebody like Larry Niven, Ringworld, he took the Diosphere, he figured out the science behind it and how things would work. That's not the way I work. I had these characters, and they were an amalgamation of two people smushed into one for each of them. And I knew them like real people. Then I went, well, wait a second, she's kind of cat-like. Cat people. Oh, he definitely has avian type of mannerisms. Bird people. Oh, he reminds me of an Ent from Lord of the Rings. That wisdom, that presence. Okay, how can I have Ents without just directly stealing? Well, tree people, just bring them down to size, flora-based.
Yeah.
And so I created characters, then created the races there were, and then went, oh, that's not scientific, but I belong to the fan community. And in fandom and science fiction, it is a very giving community. One, because you've got a lot of scientists who don't get out much, and they're very lonely, and they have a specialty, they have an expertise that they don't get to share.
Mm-hmm.
And they're eager and willing and excited.
Mm.
And I come up to one and go, hey, Bob, I want an avian race, but I'm not quite sure how to make it work. Well, let's sit down and do that. Do you have 5 hours?
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. He will help you, and he'll call over some of his friends. There'll be a geologist. There'll be, an exobiologist.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll reverse engineer the race and get into the anatomy and physiology and what that would have taken. Then they'll design the race. Then I have to go to somebody to help evolve the planet. And then once you evolve the planet, then you evolve the history,
Mm-hmm.
and then you create the society. And so it is like playing in a sandbox. It is just playing. It's having fun.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's also finding people to play with, so to speak, as well.
and
Right?
I don't know why the whole concept of writers being hermits still holds true.
I don't either.
I know it used to be that you could pound out a novel, send it out with a cold query, maybe get published.
Mm-hmm.
But in science fiction, it really helps to have other people with your science because it's just too complex.
Mm-hmm.
And even Mary Shelley, the godmother of science fiction,
Mm-hmm.
the very first science fiction writer,
Yeah.
she wrote Frankenstein at a writer's retreat with a prompt of, let's write scary horror stories. There was no science fiction term at the time.
Right.
And so at this level, one, you need it for input, for feedback, for critiquing, for beta reading, all that kind of stuff for the creation. But the other thing that you need a community for is writers now are expected, even once they publish, even if they're traditionally published, to do all the things that indie authors do
Mm-hmm.
in promoting that book.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't hide in their closet. So I didn't bring it, but I've also written a paranormal mystery thriller with a touch of romance set in small town Iowa called Abby's Fire that I wrote with my 80-year-old aunt who's lived in small town Iowa her entire life.
Oh.
Part of the deal is she never has to go to any writers' events. She doesn't have to do social media.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have to belong to any groups or anything outside of her writing critique group because she does not feel comfortable doing those things.
Right. Okay.
And when she was growing up, she was a closet writer because it was embarrassing to admit that she wanted it to be more than a hobby, a genteel lady who wrote in a journal. They did not try to become a published author. And so I do all of that. As you can tell, I'm super shy.
Uh-huh.
And she stays the hermit. And most authors either have to be outgoing, or they have to fake it, or they're absolutely painful to watch when they go and do readings and are sweating bullets and reading in a monotone and shaking like a leaf. So, yeah, you need a community to write, to promote, to improve, to edit.
You're definitely right. In fact, I would say that a community is almost essential to keeping you. I mean, I think it makes me reflect on my own writing journey and how it got to a point in my own life where I was so cut off from the outside world, so to speak, when it came to my writing, that it made me not want to write anymore after a while. And it was only after coming into a community, did it
Mhm.
start like sort of building back up again, and then
Mhm.
it grew from there?
Yeah, I've
So,
always belonged to a writers group. Currently, it's Gold Country Writers.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to say it again at the end, but I'm getting ready to do a presentation on trilogies
Right.
for them, and the do's and don'ts, and the pitfalls,
Mm-hmm.
and the advantages, because there are a lot of really bad 14, 15 book series out there, and there's a way to avoid it.
Well, yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit, because I think especially like when I think of sequels, for example,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's like, how many sequels that are good can you really name? Sure, there's a good amount, but then you think, how many good trilogies can I really name? And it's like, now you get even like smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about, like, making a good trilogy, or stuff that you've learned as you've come along, a little
Mm-hmm.
preview.
Trilogies are the sweet spot, because they've got a beginning, middle, end just right there for you.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, each book is long enough to give you a beginning, middle, end plot so that they're satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
And so they give you more time so that the reader can really get invested in the characters,
Mm-hmm.
really come to understand the settings,
Mm-hmm.
really come to understand, if it's fantasy, the rules of the magic. Because even in fantasy, consistency in magic is what makes it acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
It may be the suspension of disbelief, but if you throw the reader out by saying that the powder has to be mixed with filtered water here, and then she scoops it up from the river there, that's it. Our community's done with you.
Yeah.
And so it lets them feel like they're an expert by book 3.
Mm-hmm.
And they're invested.
Mm-hmm.
And they know what the goal was from book 1.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been at this for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're not fatigued yet.
Right.
So the secret, I feel, as an editor, because remember, my day job, I see what happens with other writers. And one of the biggest pieces of advice I give is, after you've written a draft, you've got to let it rest. You can't see the mistakes in your own writing right after you've done it.
Mm-hmm.
Yay, go write something else. Have fun. It doesn't matter if you ever use it again.
Yeah.
You probably will,
Mm-hmm.
some part of it somewhere, but go play at something else.
Yeah.
Go do a zero class. Or take my class, write that book in 10 weeks through Sierra College, and crank out something, kind of like NaNoWriMo. God rest in peace. And then you will have had the experience of writing something completely different. It can even be in a different genre or subgenre.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have these new eyes. And then rewrite before you start taking it to a critique group or somebody else, and you'll have the deadline
Mm-hmm.
of getting those chapters done to turn in. And then once you finish the trilogy, you'll have another book ready to really work on, and you'll work on something else. So that way, eventually, you might come back and write another trilogy in that world if the audience is demanding it.
Right.
And you've left them wanting something more.
Mm-hmm.
That is an amazing thing to have happen. And so it's, so write a trilogy, do something else,
Mm-hmm.
come back to it, and you will find that your universe is stronger for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard for me, because I actually have a triple trilogy. But the middle trilogy
Mm-hmm.
is going to wait till after I finish the trilogy with my aunt on those Abbey Fire books
Mm-hmm.
set in Mount Prospect, because, well, she wants them done.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives me some time to let Paraxous Cluster set.
How do you, when it comes to your trilogies, how do you get over the, I want to call it like the setup phase? Because it seems like a lot of work trips over themselves because they're trying to set up this whole vast world in the very beginning, which makes it just feel like you're crawling through it, you're slogging through it. And then by the second one, things are picking up and all the action's happening.
Right, and in Arthur C. Clarke's day, that was perfectly acceptable. That was called eating your broccoli. And that was just getting the nutritional part that you had to have to digest the rest down so you could go on with the story. Well, once science fiction realized that they were only 4 to 7, not 47, 4 to 7% of the fiction market and could not survive an only fandom, they had to figure out how to capture more mainstream readers, and it became not acceptable. If you submit a manuscript, agents and acquisition editors won't even read your prologue. They just don't. There's no point in it. If your story doesn't start on page 1, and if they start chapter 1 and your story doesn't really start by chapter 3, you don't get past the slush reader. That agent or acquisition editor never even sees the manuscript. It's some flunky intern whose job is to throw away 100 manuscripts for every one they pass on to the assistant acquisition editor or agent.
That's like screenwriting.
Yes. So here's the thing people don't realize. It's perfectly fine to do that in your discovery draft or even your first draft. People are publishing now that self-publishing is so easy. They're publishing their discovery draft or first draft, and they're shooting themselves in the foot. The first draft, and I'll just keep using first draft, is you telling yourself the story. Nobody else should ever read that. It's garbage. And you shouldn't put garbage out. So you write that one, you tell yourself the story, you set it up, you write that prologue with all that backstory, then you have it sitting there. And as you're writing the first 7 chapters, you get to a scene where something doesn't make sense. And you go, the reader needs to know that Lord Byron cheated on his wife. Okay, now I can work that in. And then you get here, she's Metaflagoan. Now I can work in that they're the ones that stopped the Khatian Empire when they were eating cyans. And you do that as the stories go on, so that by the time they're in the 7th chapter, they've eaten their broccoli and they haven't even noticed. And they're comfortable. And you've smoothed out the transitions in the next draft. So, in this day and age, it's so hard to say draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, because people will sit there with the Word doc and tweak and tweak and tweak on it. But by the time you've tweaked to a certain point, it's another draft.
Right.
So I still use the traditional terms.
Right. Well, and I think it's so important to state how there is a time between your first draft and your next draft where you go off and you go off and do something else. Like, I completely agree. A lot of, especially self-published work, not to say all of it.
I would say there's a good 10% of the indie authors, not self-published authors who just throw it up there, of the indie authors who have a product that
it's just not ready.
Yeah.
And I've never thought about it quite like how you're discovering the first draft is the author discovery draft. I love that idea. There's something so fundamentally like interesting and intriguing about it, and it's also exciting.
It frees you up.
Exactly. It totally does. It allows you to sort of explain everything out in detail as much as you want, because later on you're gonna go back over it, and then you're gonna do all the flourishes and tighten it up and everything.
Yeah, I love it in my class when my students go, and because we do a lot of exercises and stuff in the class. It's a workshop, and when they have that moment, there's an energy in the room. Yeah,
definitely.
So,
well, I wanted to say thank you so much for being here today and for taking time out to talk to us. Why don't you go ahead and just give us the details about your upcoming event really quick?
Sure. So, first of all, I'm going to be doing a discussion on the do's and don'ts of trilogies on Wednesday, the 14th, I think it is, at Gold Country Writers. And it's from 10 to noon in the Rose Room of the City Hall here in Auburn. And I'm going to have some giveaways. I'm going to have some worksheets for people to take home. And hopefully it'll be very practical information. The second plug I'd like to make, and poor Daniel didn't get warned about this, I just found out I'm going to be a panelist at World Science Fiction Convention. And it's actually going to be in California this year. And World Science Fiction Convention only comes to America every other year. And so it being on the West Coast is kind of rare. It really is a world convention. I can't go when it's in Tokyo or Australia. And I got selected to be a panelist. And anybody who is interested in speculative fiction, which covers the whole genre from supernatural to fantasy to rom fantasies, I'll roll my eyes as hard as I can, to hard sci-fi to science fantasy, you really got to check it out. It's better than a Comic-Con. It's in Anaheim in August, and it's going to be fun.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you again for being a part of our show today and for talking to us a little bit.
You're welcome. This was fun.
And thank you guys for joining us again for another show. Again, this is Work in Progress, a show where we talk to local artists about that you may not have heard of before, about their work and whatnot. So thank you so much. I've been your host, Dan Araujo, and we will see you on the next one.